might be bright. Let me just see something. Oh no, that's actually a lot better. How long have you been playing?
Since I was 4 years old.
When did you know that you loved it?
My mother's a violinist, and I remember listening to her practice. We had a music room in our house, and she was playing the Bach solo sonatas and partitas, and in particular, I remember she was playing the second movement of the first partita, and it's this really fast, like intense, really kind of fiery sounding piece. And I remember just thinking that I wanted to do that. I thought it sounded so cool. I want to be able to play like that. And I ended up learning that piece when I was in high school. I think there's the technical aspect of playing music, which is very demanding and requires a lot of focused attention and time. And then there's the creative aspect of music, and there needs to be a balance between the two. So you want to be able to physically play the ideas that you have. And I've always drawn a lot of inspiration from non-musical activities, like that really informs my playing. So when I was in college, I was actually an anthropology major, and I studied cultural anthropology, and I did a lot of research, and I traveled in Mexico, and I traveled in India, and I met a lot of interesting people. And I guess I was lucky because I had a lot of technical training as a kid, so I was able to take some time to do some non-musical things that would inform the more creative aspects of my playing. And now I sort of write songs about all of those experiences. And even now, like, I really enjoy collaborating with non-musicians, poets, writers, dancers, filmmakers, because I don't think that the music itself is really enough. So I think it is kind of a struggle to find a balance between not getting too engulfed in your instrument and playing perfectly, and then also like not straying too far from your goals, And the song is Time. Falling in time, falling in time, falling in a cloud of tomorrow, looking for a key we can borrow, and many days are many lines, too many roads that we can climb. I'm not the one, I'm not the one, I'm not the answer that you'll find, only to wander and unwind. And many days are many lines, too many roads that we can climb. So beautiful. Own since 2009, so I guess it's like almost 5 years. But I grew up on Long Island, so I was already pretty familiar with the city, and I had lived in New York for about a year in 2008, I want to say, 2007. So I guess the answer is no. Not new to New York. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'm too familiar with it. Like, all of the places that I walk by that I see remind me of like different phases of my life, that things don't, for example, Union Square is this really strange place in New York where when I was 19, I had a job there, and then when I was like 22 again, I had a job there working at the farmers market, and then I have all these memories of like meeting up with friends there, or meeting new people there. So I mean, that's just one example. There's a lot of places in New York that I can go to and sort of reminisce about these little snapshots of different parts of my young adulthood,
So you're a native New Yorker. You grew up on Long Island.
I guess I grew up very far out east, and I grew up right across the bridge from Fire Island, and like you could literally walk across the bridge to Smith Point Beach. So where I grew up was like, I guess almost like rural, but I always like took the train into the city to visit. It's kind of interesting growing up on Long Island, actually, because I feel like you have a more in-depth understanding of the history of New York, because a lot of the people that live on Long Island are transplants from the city. So, even my grandparents on my dad's side of the family were from Manhattan and Queens, and my mom's side of the family were from the Bronx, and they always had stories about old New York. So there's a lot of like historical connection, I think. I'm pretty fascinated by like the history of the city in relation to Long Island. Now Long Island's so built up. The places that used to be farms out there that I used to go visit when I was a kid to go like pick apples and stuff, they have like condominiums there now, and it's very different. It's much more suburban, almost urban in some places. Like Nassau County is a bit more built up now.
But being on the East Coast most of your life, all of your life,
Yeah.
is there any place you fantasize about moving to or living in?
I've been thinking about maybe I think I would really like the West Coast. People often say that I act like I'm from California. I don't, but I've never been there. And I've never been to Europe. I'd love to go visit and check it out. I don't know about living any of those places, but certainly to visit. And I went to college in New England, which was very beautiful and a very different pace than New York. So I kind of envision New York always being my home base, though. If I traveled somewhere outside, I would probably always kind of gravitate back here. So this song is called House, and it's about a house that I have lived in on and off. It's a friend's house. It's on Long Island. It's an extremely old house and an extremely big house, and there's been many generations of different kinds of people that have lived in it. There is a house where the dawn comes in, and the night spills out into the ocean. You can hide away, you can choose to stay if the day presents emotion. Mountains of boxes and paper clips, sedimentary lives of women, the masses of paintings and glass. There was never a sun when the dawn was new. From the perch where the roof of the starling flew, where humanity scored that house of mine. Wow. I'm actually working on an album in this coming spring. I've always worked as a side person in other people's bands, or I've worked collaboratively with people, so this is the first time I'll be doing something that's all of my own compositions. It took me a while to really even have the confidence to be like, I'm ready to do this. Working with a producer, her name is Ember Schrag, and she's amazing. She's a songwriter herself, and I used to play in her band. And I started showing her some of my own work, and she took an interest in it. So it really helps to have somebody with some guidance and direction to help in the process. So when you're working and freelancing and also trying to do creative work, you sort of have to fit it in wherever you have free time. So it makes the process a little bit slower. But then it also makes you really appreciate that creative time that you have. So my goal is to start recording in the spring and have some product by the summertime. So
Awesome.
I've already started with working out the arrangements for the songs so that I can be really prepared when I go into the studio.
And you already have like a group of musicians that you want to work with you on this?
So I'm going to play most of the instruments myself. I have a couple people in mind that I might hire just to add certain things. Like I don't play trumpet or horns, like things that I just don't play. But my idea for the album is to incorporate sounds, sort of like soundscapes, like not just using instruments, but using sounds as music.
Mm-hmm.
Like poems that they're just these little poems that are set to music, and I think of the accompaniment like a music box and music that you can carry in your pocket, you know. So when I was studying anthropology in school, naturally I sort of gravitated towards being very interested in ethnomusicology, and I got really into listening to all these field recordings that anthropologists had done throughout the world, and not just recordings of people, but recordings of sounds in nature. There's a concept in ethnomusicology called soundscapes, and the idea is that the different sounds that occur in an environment contribute to the culture, or that there's a symbiosis, so they contribute to each other. There's an ethnomusicologist named Stephen Feld who did work with bells in Europe and following how the sounds of the bells affected daily life and symbolically caused people to do different things during the course of a day. He also did another soundscape recording in Papua New Guinea where people sang songs for certain activities that they did throughout the day, and that those songs reflected the sounds that were happening in the forest or in nature. And I think similarly in an urban environment, there's a soundscape as well. So my idea was to incorporate that concept of soundscapes into my compositions. And so one example of a song that I'm working on is NASA, in order to keep track of data, makes sonification of the waves of stars. And this data is totally accessible. You can go to the NASA website and download it. And my father, who's a science teacher and a total music nerd, downloaded a bunch of these files, and he and I had been talking for a while about making compositions out of the sounds. So I have one song that I'm working on that naturally you can hear from the sound waves certain beats, certain low frequencies, certain high frequencies that, you know, you could do with a musical instrument. But I like the idea of reacting to some natural sound waves that would occur, you know, in our environment. So that was like one concept. And I like to write songs about objects or places. And so I think that the soundscape concept complements that really well. I have another song that I wrote about a house that's really special and important to me, and my idea is to take a field recorder and go get some recordings of the natural day-to-day life in the house. Maybe people having conversation, or the wind chimes outside, or different parts of the house, the rooftops, and seeing like what sort of musical elements can be drawn out of those sounds. So there's going to be a combination of acoustic instruments and arrangements for strings, harp, keyboards, things like that. But then there's also going to be an incorporation of these different sounds.